The way we lead impacts the way people live. This world needs truly human leadership.
Authenticity is not when we quote, show up as we are. Like, authenticity is literally naming it and showing up who you are and how you want to work on something. That's what gets people to run through a brick wall for you. I don't mean it literally. I don't mean in the military sense. I just mean, like, do I want people to give a discretionary amount of effort? Yeah, well, then they need to know that you care about them.
I'm Brent Stewart, your host. Thanks for listening. This podcast is an outreach of Barry-Wehmiller. You can connect with us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Barry-Wehmiller, and find our podcasts, articles, and videos at trulyhumanleadership.com. Emotions play a critical role in the way people interact, execute work, lead others, and connect with each other. As a leader, emotion is an essential component in the decisions you make in the stewardship of the lives within your span of care. When you work with people, their lives in and out of the workplace cannot just be reduced to numbers or what seems to be the most logical decision. The challenge lies in the ability to recognize and understand your own emotions and the emotions of others, to connect, care, and lead on a different level. Recently, Matt Whiat, the founding partner of Chapman Co Leadership Institute, Barry-Wehmiller's leadership and culture consulting arm, led a webinar about balancing emotion and logic for better decision making. On this episode of the Truly Human Leadership podcast, you'll hear an edited version of that webinar as Matt explains how emotionally intelligent leaders make smarter decisions that inspire others to take action, build trust, and increase resiliency. Here's Matt Whiat.
When we talk about organizations and some of the challenges that we have, especially during right now, COVID and all of the uncertainty and change that's going on, we have to make a lot of decisions. And a lot of the challenges that we have, while they might be technological in nature, a lot of it is relationships. If you want to make the business case for why do we need emotional intelligent leaders, well, here it is. And I'm going to toggle between these two screens here, if you don't mind. This is coming up to a low emotional intelligence. These are your employees. This is you. Frustrated, anxious, apprehensive, nervous, annoyed, dread. This is coming to a leader that has high emotional intelligence, or at least higher emotional awareness. Excited, confident, energized. Do I think I get a better product? Do I think I get better performance out of someone? Absolutely, I do. Absolutely. So when we think about these things, is why would we invest in our people? Well, you invest in technology for whatever reason. We call people an expense. This is why we invest in people, for these reasons. Let's jump back into a little bit of the content. And look, if you were Tom Hanks in Castaway yelling at a volleyball, Wilson, we just have to worry about our own emotions, but we're not Tom Hanks. We're not stranded on an island. You have to interact with other people. So this is why this content is obviously so impactful. What emotional intelligence is and is not. Emotional intelligence, it's literally, am I smart about my emotions? It's not having them. It's not controlling them, suppressing them, pushing them down. It's literally, am I smarter and more intentional about my emotions? It's not about being nice to people. It's not about being a quote unquote people person or a perpetual optimist. If you're on that Titanic and it hit the iceberg, telling everyone we're all going to be fine doesn't help the situation. All right. It's not about being an extrovert either. It's not about smiling all day. It's not a skill that some people have and others do not. I'm sorry to say this, but IQ, that's a deck of cards you were dealt. There are very few things you can do to move the needle, even just a little bit on IQ. However, on emotional intelligence, it's a learned skill, right? It's also not a soft skill, and it's not only for times of crisis. Emotional intelligence is the ability to recognize my emotions and the emotions of other people. It's just to discern between different feelings and literally label them appropriately. I'm not sad, I'm disdainful, I'm not angry, I'm frustrated. Having a literacy of emotion helps me to express myself so that other people understand what I'm feeling. Uses emotional information to guide thinking and behavior and adapt to environments or to achieve some goals. This is what emotional intelligence literally is. So I just wanted to start with that so that we don't think about emotional intelligence as being the happy person that walks around and high fives everyone. Pre-COVID, I know, but high fives everyone. It's not that at all. So let's get into a little bit of this. Emotional intelligence can sometimes be about predicting outcomes. You've just told your mother You are not coming home for a major holiday. Her emotions are go. What are they? Good, sad, disappointed, hurt, rejected. Oh, I like someone wrote angry. Like this is not going to go well. Insulted. Good one. Bummed. Got it. Not surprised. Like you're not going to be here again. Got it. I spent a long time. I spent over 20 years in the military all over the place, West Africa, Eastern Europe. And so when I was not coming home for holidays, my mother did not, she totally understood. She was like, well, it's just you for the last 20 years. Like someone wrote, good joke, son. Like, no, you're going to be coming home. Okay. Upset, rejection, insulted. Great. All right, let's switch it up. Let's say we're the same thing, but we've told our father, we're not coming home for a major holiday. His emotions are what? Meh. It's a great one. Meh. Angry, understanding, indifferent. Maybe someone's excited, like, oh, great, you're not coming home. It is what it is. That's a great one. That's how my father would have been too. Like, all right, it is what it is. You're on deployment, whatever. Understanding, your mother, this is a great one. Your mother will be sad. Okay, lax, no problem. See you next time. Now listen, this is important, all right? I know that I went along gender lines here. That's not the point that I'm trying to draw out here. My point is you can predict someone's emotions of a decision that you've made or are going to make, even before they happen. You know, you might say, well, that's because I know my mom better. I know my father better. And it doesn't matter what the emotions are here. I'm just pointing out to you, I can understand the pattern that someone's drawing, right? And so as an example, when the pattern is off, there's always more to the story. So in other words, I can predict what the pattern is. And if the pattern seems a little bit off, well, what's going on here in that person's emotions? Emotional intelligence is not just being aware of the emotions of others, it's choosing to do something with that information. Hey, if I know mom is going to be really disappointed, do I listen more? Do I explain more? Do I let her give her viewpoints out? Do I name the elephant in the room? Do I give space or time? Do I choose my behavior intentionally, when to tell mom, how to tell mom? And the same thing for dad. Let me give you another example. Before my leader says a word, I can tell if they are in a good or bad mood. True or false? So 90% of people would say, oh, I can tell if my leader is in a good or bad mood. So the point I'm going to give back to you here is, and they can do the same with you. So if we think that we are hiding our emotions, if we are being able to just walk in and put this facade up or this suit of armor and to walk in and no one's going to tell if I'm in a good or bad mood, you're not fooling anybody, because they're not fooling anybody either. We're very adept. We've always been born with a nonverbal language, watching people's cues, watching the patterns that they have. We're pattern machines. Our minds are constantly trying to make sense of the world faster. Our minds are not lazy. They're trying to be very efficient. 50,000 years ago, that efficiency was to keep us safe. It's just never been turned off. So I'm watching for the smallest of cues. That's interesting. They didn't comment here. That's interesting. They didn't come over to the coffee station. That's interesting. They didn't say good morning to us. They went right to their office. That's interesting. They're looking down at this meeting. Usually they're excited when the numbers come up, whatever it might be. I am constantly looking for patterns in people, and it's in my subconscious, and I'm making decisions on it, and I'm watching it happen. And others are doing the same for you all. Now, I was just going to mention this. Is it harder on Zoom? It sure is if you don't start your video. So for us, when we work with clients, that's one of the big issues we have is turn on the video if possible. And I know not everyone's in a time or place to do that. But when we run web meetings, this is why video is so important. I want to be able to tell the nonverbals. And in some cases, Zoom actually even gives us a better opportunity to do this, because instantly I can look and see 24 or 49 people on one screen, or 24 on one screen, I think, and then I can move to the next screen. Then I'm just watching for patterns. And when I see one of them is off, I'm going to go set up a one-on-one time with that person. So just the opportunity there. Emotions can exert a huge and often unconscious influence also over our decisions. My decisions are attempts at predicting future outcomes. But if I'm feeling positive, I might come to a different conclusion than if we're feeling negative. Here's a really, really bizarre story. Do you know the best time to meet a parole board? The best time to meet a parole board, and you're like, why, Matt? Why have you been in prison for this? No, but they did a study on is there a time when a prisoner is meeting a parole board to be released on parole, is there a certain best time? And it turned out there was, and it was right after lunch. My blood sugar has spiked. I've just had food. I feel good about life. I feel better about the outcomes. And they can literally track, since we're humans, we're pattern machines, I can literally track to decisions being made and a more positive outcome. I know some of you are like writing a note, like note to self, if ever. All right. This is really quickly on the human brain. So why do emotions do this? Well, I have my instinctive brain. These are my auto responses. Right? If we were being technical about this, this might be in my medulla oblongata. This is where my alarm bell goes off and I instinctively react to it. This is where a car backfires and I instinctively react to it. That's just automatic, auto responses. My thinking brain, if I were talking about the technical term like the cerebral cortex, this is my problem solving, my data manipulation, my thinking, my creativity, all the great stuff. But sitting between those two, between my automatic responses and my thinking, lies my emotional brain. This is maps and mission control. And so to the previous quote, if I'm feeling more positive about my life and outcomes, my thinking brain, my creativity, literally changes. And if I can get swamped by emotions, it takes over a lot of that thinking brain area of that. I know we mentioned that we're going to talk about decision making, so let's get into that. All of us walk around with a certain amount of emotion and logic in ourselves. All right. And I'm just going to ask you to self-assess, but I'm going to force this so that you have to actually answer one way or another. So let's think about in making a decision, where do we think we tend to start in what area? Is it in the logic side? Or is it on the emotion side? Where do we think we start? Are we cognizant of how we start out in a decision? So as an example, I start out much more on the logic side. I want to know numbers. I want to know results. I want to know how fast. I want to know the details of the data, right? And so then I realize, oh, I'm actually not starting from the emotional side at all. And so if I'm going to index in one area, I need to pull some more emotions into that, because what we appreciate are leaders who are able to do both. This is what we would call the wise mind. I'm bringing in emotional data and I'm bringing in logical data. This is only for me because I really enjoy science fiction. I think science fiction is like the greatest hopes and fears of humankind, right? We write stories. It's like, oh my gosh, there's aliens. Yay, we're not alone in the universe. Oh my gosh, aliens are here to take over Earth and kill us, right? It's the greatest fears and the greatest hopes. A great sci-fi series is Star Trek, and one of the most endearing characters on that was Leonard Nimoy, and this was Spock. They wrote Spock in this area. So they wrote Spock like this. They just took out all of the emotion. And they wrote the character to where everything he did and all the decisions he made were just based on logic. And it captivated us because we started to recognize how challenging and how frustrating it is when a person behaves purely logical. And the converse would be true as well, just emotion. And our emotional impact on decision-making is really interesting. When any kind of change happens or a decision is made, or I'm putting people into this box, if you will, information is received on the left-hand side. Everyone goes through these steps. Some of us, depending, it's very contextual, some of us go through them fast, some of them slower. It depends on what the change is, the decision is. But there's a response, there's letting go, there's looking forward, there's learning. And you can see down below, there's a positive and there's a challenging aspect to this. So response, I'm excited, or I'm fearful, I'm letting go, this is relief, or I'm disappointed it didn't happen. I'm looking forward, there's a hope, or you know what, I've just finally accepted. That's the lot, that's what we're gonna do here. And learning it's ownership of it, or I'm just gonna attach to it. And then to action finally. But what happens is, oftentimes we act like that's not there, and I expect people to go from, I gave you a decision, and I expect you to act. This is what people are going through. This is what's in the box, if you will. This is where emotionally intelligent, not only your decisions, but how we communicate those can help your people understand the decision you've made and literally lean in and have ownership and attachment to it and literally act. Reaction, we're going to talk more about a little bit of response. The reaction is it's often instant. It's driven by the beliefs, the biases, the thoughts of unconscious mind. It's likely short-term focus. I'm just reacting to something. You said this, I'm going to say this back. Response comes from information from both the conscious mind and the unconscious. It's short and long-term focus. We're going to talk more a little bit about response. Now, some of these decisions, as we think about, have been all over business. There's a lot of the failures in those decision making. I don't know if you're aware of this, but Kodak literally invented the first digital camera. In discussions about what they were going to do with the digital camera, the decision they came to was this would only be used for really high-end photographers, and that they were a film company. They were the #1 film company in the entire world. I think Fuji was #2. I'm not even sure you can buy film anymore, maybe at a specialty shop. Right? Borders, they literally outsourced their online sales to just a startup retailer, Amazon. And Blockbuster, yes, had the opportunity to buy Netflix, but my gosh, why would you do that when your whole business was built on people coming to your store and renting tapes and CDs and such? All right, I'm going to give you the construct of how we're going to run through this now. Emotionally intelligent decisions. I know this is an eye chart, but I'm going to work through it in these 4 areas. One is we're going to take in some emotional data. How do you personally feel about the decision? I know this sounds like we're just got to hit the I tried button here with me for a second. Think about how you're feeling about it. And it doesn't have to be you're the corporate cheerleader on it. It could be that you're anxious. It could be multiple things. I'm anxious, I'm excited, I'm concerned, I'm hopeful, I'm all of these things. Now I'm going to think about how will others feel about this decision? I know this is a lot of change. Perhaps you're also anxious about this. Perhaps you don't understand and you're a little bit fearful, or perhaps you're actually a little bit frustrated. This is the 4th time we've put this change on you. Right? Think about who will be excited, unsure. I'm literally putting myself, this is the mechanics of empathy. I'm literally putting myself in the shoes of someone else and thinking, how are they going to act and behave? How are they going to think? How are they going to feel? If I were being funny about it or trying to be funny about it, this is, for anyone remembers Saturday Night Live, they had a person called Jack Handy, and it was Deep Thoughts by Jack Handy. And Jack Handy said, before criticizing someone, you should walk a mile in their shoes. That way, when you do criticize them, you're a mile away and you have their shoes. But the point of this is, can I put myself in the shoes of another and say, what are the feelings going to be for that person or that group? All right. So that's on the emotional data I want you to take in, and yours as well. Okay. All right, then the second part here, let's take in some logical data. All right, and so as I asked you, do you start from a decision being more emotional or more logical? If I'm more emotional, and then probably this first block was really easy for me, I need to index harder into the logical data. If you're a person like me, this is an easy one for me. What financial implications does it have? What facts, figures, stats should I consider, and what skills, talents are going to be needed? I know this one comes easy, so I have to index harder into putting some thought into my emotional data, how I feel about it, how I think others are going to feel about it. And the reason is, if I don't do that, then I come across cold, callous, uncaring. I can. If I go all the way over on the emotional data, for people who are more logical minded, they think to themselves, well, this is fine for the people, but what's the decision? How are we making this scalable? Why is this going to work? I have so many questions about this. This is why these 2 areas are important. So this is the logical data, taking in the logical data. All right, some interesting ways I can get more into the logical data as well. Fact versus story. Can I just call it and just say, did it really happen that bad? Is it the story? The story I'm telling myself is. I can literally put myself in there and say, how bad is it going to be? What are the implications of it? We really love 2x2s, and we like expanding those 2x2s out. One of the ways you can look at bringing in some more logical data is by doing an effort and impact 2x2. How much effort is it going to take, and what's the impact going to be? And I can literally, I know we're just kind of messing around with this one, I can literally list all the projects that I have in an organization that we're doing. I can put them down and say, okay, where is the highest impact, the least amount of effort? These are called quick wins, right? And so I would list this as logical data and put that into my decision-making kind of matrix, my mind, if you will. This is a lot of effort, but huge impact. That's a major project. And if I have, wow, it's very little impact and very little effort, I'm going to leave those ones alone. But what are ways logically that I can put this against a 2x2 and create some criteria so that when I'm explaining the decision, the logic behind it, I can bring something like this up. The Eisenhower decision matrix is another great way to look at these things. Eisenhower decision matrix was very similar. It was urgent and important. Those things that are both urgent and important, I'm going to do that. Those things that are neither urgent and important, I'm going to push off. Those things that are urgent but not important, I'm going to delegate. And those things that are not urgent but very important, I'm going to schedule. But thinking about how you can use a 2x2, and you can put anything you want in here. Sometimes we'll put this discretionary income for an organization versus measurable business impact, right? Like safety training, huge measurable business impact, not discretionary income. Build your own 2x2, but this helps you to bring a little bit more onto logic. And I see the chat there by Mary. So effort seems easier to assess than impact, more subjective. True, yes. Impact could be more subjective. The impact kind of forces you into saying, all right, if I'm not going to be subjective about impact, I need to put some financing around it. How much is it going to cost? What do we think the business is going to be? How many customers might we get? That's what the kind of thinking I'm trying to push us into, so that when I'm announcing and making a decision with my logic side, that I can make it less subjective. But you're right, the titles might be a little subjective, but it forces me into getting into some more quantitative information. All right, the next area we're going to dive into is a little bit about our values. How do your personal values, and if you don't have like, oh, I've written down my personal values, it's just values are what I see the world through values. Let me jump back and forth here if you don't mind for a second. So values, whether I've articulated them or not, values serve as a lens through which I make meaning of my experiences. They influence what we pay attention to. They affect our decisions. Literally, a value is one's judgment of what is important in life. So for me, as an example, what's really important for me, my team members, how it happens is hard work. Like, did you put in the sweat equity? Did you grab the oar and row with all your might? Even if we fail, even if we can't make it, even if it's too high of a hill to climb, an ocean to transverse, I want to know, did we give it our all? Because at the end of the day, I want to make sure that we ran the race as best as we could. And we handed off the baton to someone else. I'm knowing being a little preachy here. What I'm trying to say is we all have certain values about what's important to us. It might be kindness. It might be that we're bringing everyone along. This allows people to understand our decision-making a little bit better. And so if I jump back into the construct that we're playing with here, how do your own personal values align to the decision you're making? Perhaps they're organizational values. If I want that brilliant purpose statement and values and mission and vision and all that stuff you have on your website, if I want that to be lived in the organization, I need to bring it in to my communication and to how I'm making these decisions. And I'm just going to name it, like, where could misalignment occur? As an example, for the Leadership Institute, we're all about connecting people, being really respectful. Our content's built on that, how we structure programs. And so then when I work with an organization, there are some organizations that create products or services, and what they do, then I would say, this might be a misalignment with our values. And that's important for us to name. And if I don't know, then I'm going to say, I'm not sure. And we're going to go down this road with this client. We're going to see how it goes. So values. And then the other one, as mentioned, was a little bit on the values of the organization. So for Barry-Wehmiller, our purpose, we measure success by the way we touch the lives of people. And you go, okay, it's a nice little statement. Well, we literally made the decision to launch Chapman Co, this leadership institute, the consultancy. Made the decision to build our surveys, to bring all this content online into the masses, all the stuff we were using inside. We made the decision to launch this business because it didn't say we measure success by the way we touch the lives of Barry-Wehmiller employees or their families or their loved ones or partners or friends or whoever. It said people. It's the reason why we decided to launch an office in Cape Town, South Africa, literally by this statement. So if I'm going to make decisions like this, can I pull in my values and the values of another organization? All right, great questions to ask. If I were making this decision based solely on my own personal values, what would the outcome be? If I were making the decision based solely on the company values, what would the outcome be? And is there a difference? Great ones to know. And if you're like, well, actually there's some discrepancy there, great, then you name it. Just name it, it's perfectly fine. But naming it allows people to understand your decision better and your feelings and the logic you're taking in. The other one that I really like that I don't see a lot of organizations doing as well or as well as in the communication is, have I considered other people's perspectives? Are there other perspectives that I think we should be considering? And someone who's more knowledgeable about this, someone who's really smart about this, someone who sees a decision or outcome differently, or a constituency which we haven't considered. And it isn't that I have to go do all of those things. Perhaps it's, hey, you know what we haven't done is we actually haven't considered the constituency of IT, and we need to do that. But this decision, I think we're all in line with, but that's one of the areas where we're going to need to go talk with them to kind of make the refinement of this. But these are emotionally intelligent decisions. I'm taking emotional data, logical data, values, and other perspectives as I make these decisions. All right. When considering a decision as well, though, there's a disproportionate weight given to the first information the mind receives. It just is. Initial impressions, estimates, or data anchors, or data, they literally anchor our subsequent thoughts and judgments. And I put this up, there's a wine list menu up here. The reason is, I don't know if you ever noticed, and this one doesn't have it, but I don't know if you ever noticed when you go to a restaurant and there's a wine list, there's usually a wine that's extremely expensive. That's called the anchor. The anchor is there because it makes everything else seem relative. So when you see an anchor and it's a wine that's $2,500 for a bottle and you go, I would never pay $2,500 for one bottle of wine. Are you kidding me? Now, $250, that sounds more reasonable. Well, that's because I had an anchor of $2,500. $250 is still a pretty expensive bottle of wine, but now it seems completely irrelevant. Hey, it's only $250. Then if I had a cheaper wine, then I'd be like, oh, my anchor's $250. I would never pay $250 for a bottle of wine, but I pay this $50. That's why they do that. So when considering your decisions, the mind gives disproportionate weight to the first information that I receive. So if you're working with your team and you're a leader, speaking first, you're going to color the rest of the conversation, especially what data comes up first and what's said first. And so if you mention to me about how you're feeling about something or how you think about something, you're going to color the rest of the group as they make those decisions. All right. So let's talk about actually you as well and about the unique lens when we make these decisions. The unique lens is what I see. And so sometimes in our training, we'll ask people like, what's going on in this picture? And so it's not just the picture. The world doesn't exist as it is. The world exists as we all see it. And what I do is I don't see the picture. I see that picture through my lens. My lens are whatever experiences I might have had, fears, needs, self-image, my values, assumptions, perhaps even my current role. But what happens is, and my lens isn't flawed. No one's lens is flawed. It's just that we all have one. And so all of us are seeing the same picture, but it's through a lens of our own. And so the way to get out of that is when I communicate and make these decisions, I just share more about how I'm thinking. It allows people in and to understand me. That happens. It allows people to predict me. People like prediction because that's where trust comes from. This is what we would call a higher emotionally intelligent leader. Isn't someone who walks around and is happy. It's not someone who never gets angry. It's somebody who names it. I used to run boot camp for the military. And when I would see some of my drill instructors or lieutenants or someone, and they would get upset and they would be yelling at someone, I would call them afterwards and I would say, hey, did you have a plan? Did you plan to get angry like that? And they'd say, what do you mean? And I said, the yelling and everything. He's like, no, I was, angry, I'm pissed or whatever. I'm like, next time have a plan. Because if you don't, you're out of control. If you want to use anger, or disappointment. It is not an unproductive emotion, but it is when you let yourself just have these emotions. Use them more intentionally. It's okay to tell a team at times, I'm not happy with this outcome. I'm disappointed in our product, or I'm disappointed in how we all came together in this. That's an emotionally intelligent communication of this. All right, so as an example, I'm back in the emotional intelligent decisions. I want you to name a person from the decision you're working through. Name a person who often takes a very different perspective than you, but that's also knowledgeable about this decision. So as an example, I asked you all, do you tend to start more from the logic or tend to start more from the emotion? If you know someone who's more emotional, ask them their perspective about the decision. What do they think? What would they say? It's a great one to ask, but you're trying to literally find your polar opposite in this case. And then who's a person or a group whose perspective just hasn't been consulted on this that you think might be impacted? Great way when we're making all these decisions, okay? I'm going to show you how to communicate it. I'm going to show you a video, and then we'll take some Q&A and we'll wrap this up. So when I communicate, and so I work a lot, I was in the Pentagon as a speechwriter, and I thought about a lot of how this kind of is layered in. It's the same way I'm communicating these things. I'm communicating my emotional information, how I feel or how corporate feels, whatever that is, but I'm trying to make it personal, how I feel. And I acknowledge the feelings of others. Some logical information. Here's what we took in. Here's what we know to be true. And here's what we know that we have to continue to investigate. Here's where we just don't have an answer yet. Gosh, that honesty feels so good when you see it coming from someone. The values. Hey, as a leader, I believe in this. As an organization, we said we believe in this. Therefore, we're making this decision. And then the last one is perspectives, if applicable. This is a really emotionally intelligent communication. When organizations have done studies of where employees receive the most trusted information from, typically blog posts, peer group within the organization, specified leaders is where they get the most trusted information. You know what ranks almost dead last? Official corporate communications. Because we don't do this. We don't humanize it. We don't actually open up and be transparent. And I get it that sometimes we're concerned about the legalities of such things, but I'm just mentioning, like, it's not being read, it's not being trusted. Typically, and you can ask this in your own organization, typically official corporate communication will rank at the bottom of, is it accurate and relevant information that I use and trust? I'm much more likely to listen to my peer group because what do my peers talk about? This, how I feel, what was happening, those type of things. I'm going to bring up some action items and take some questions as well. But before making your next decision, consider some things. How do you feel about the decision? Good, bad, or indifferent? It's okay. How do others feel about it? What's the story you're telling yourself about it? Is it really going to be that bad like the Hindenburg landing, or is it, hey, I don't know, we're going to figure this out? What factual information do we have, and what information do I need to go get in order to make the decision better? What do your personal values tell you? And what do your company values tell you? And then who else should you consult with? So those are some action items there about this. I'm going to just take some, can I just take some questions here? So one person said, hey, if all team members approach a decision first logically, is the team doomed? Yes. No, the team is not doomed. Look, I think for my background, especially for being in the military, most of us were much more logically minded. And so that's the first thing that we approached was the emotion of it. I mean, the logic of it. It's important, though, if you know this and you're aware of it, one, just name it. Perhaps your entire team starts it out more logically. Perhaps there's some people that are more emotional in that. Perhaps I can leverage them. And if I am all logical, then one, I'm going to name it. Hey, for the team, we tend to make decisions based purely on logic. And yet I realize we impact other people to include ourselves. It doesn't mean that we don't have feelings. It just means that that's where I start. And then just ask the question, what feelings do we have about this? It can be everything from excitement to ambivalence to fear. I'm just going to start naming it more. Great. What's driving that? What's driving the ambivalence? Like, I want to know you have no feelings toward it. Why is that? And then I'm going to get into the conversation about the logic. Well, I don't know if this is actually going to be a good decision. It's the 5th time we've changed this. Great way to get into, how can we make a better decision of this? So no, the team is not doomed. Okay, as someone who generally approaches situations logically, I often get the feedback that I don't care, I'm cold. From someone that approaches more logically, what are some tricks for showing emotion the other person exchange and empathize with? I will tell you that not only how we're kind of, there's a nature and nurture component to this as well. Like I asked you, just how do you make decisions more? We said, oh, I'm much more logical. Part of that is right in our DNA, like the nature, like this is who I am, just a much more logical. Part of it might be in the experiences we've had. There have been times where I've been in places and it's called empathy exhaustion. I'm just like, everyone has a sob story. I'm in the middle of this kind of stuff. It's all terrible. I'm not saying this is right. I could feel myself just becoming, almost to protect myself from feelings, I would become more logical. I think if you're a really logical person, I think using this construct and forcing yourself, even to sit down and say, how do I feel about this? And what I think you're going to find is it won't be that you have zero feelings whatsoever. You'll have some kind of feeling toward it. One of the ways we first started out when I was talking about this content was, hey, can we name what our emotions are? Do we have some emotional literacy behind it? So one of the activities that we do, and this might help you for whoever put this question in about how am I doing a better job of being a little more naming my emotions. One is, it's called the 24-hour emotion activity. And so I'm going to bring this up. What you do is you think back 24 hours and you name all the emotions you've gone through in the entire day. Name them all. You'll probably get between, if you're a more logical person, you probably get somewhere between 5 and 12. For those who really have a much greater emotional literacy behind it, you might get about somewhere up to 20. Then you look at this. This is called a feelings wheel. This is more an adult one. They make it for kids as well, right? So there'll be a skinny down one, but so kids, especially in school, and so they'd be like, okay, can you tell me how you're feeling? This is after I've done the 24 hours, I've listed them all that I can. Now I look at this wheel and I go, what are the other things that happened here? Oh, I wasn't mad. I wasn't angry. I wasn't aggressive. I was jealous, actually, or I was infuriated, or I was annoyed. These are very different things. What you'll find is almost everyone literally almost doubles the emotions they've had. So if I have challenges in literally sharing what my emotions are, doing the 24-hour emotion activity can really help someone increase their emotional literacy that allows me then to make more emotionally intelligent decisions and a better communication structure as well. Let me take the other question here. Are there any techniques to help get us out of a reaction into a response quicker? Okay, that's a tough one. There's a couple tips and tricks and tools you can use in this one. Let me bring up the action items one more time here. A couple of things I can do to keep from being so reactive into more response. One is, can I literally just get myself into thinking, do I have to say something right now? Do I have to make the decision right now? I cannot stand name droppers. I was telling LeBron James, but this one time I literally was with the former president of Ecuador, Jamil Mahoud, and he was such a really I think he's a professor at Harvard, and we were doing some work, and he and I were sitting out in our properties out by Aspen and stuff, and he says the whole group was talking, they're like arguing about something, some kind of discussion we were having, and he's there to be the kind of Yoda. We call it a Yoda. It's the person who kind of just keeps the room calm and says what people aren't supposed to be saying, or says the things that the group maybe won't say, but he plays that role, like the elder statesman, if you will. And he says, I think of three things before I speak in front of a group. I think, does the group need this information? Does the group need this information right now? And does the group need this information right now and from me? And if all of those answers are yes, then I speak. And of course, nobody wanted to speak. Right? We were all just sat around and stared at each other like cats on Zoom. But it's a really interesting. So when you say, how do I get out of reaction to response? I give myself some kind of rubric of when am I going to respond? How much am I going to talk? So one way I can get out of being so reactive and more intentional responses, do I know myself really well? And if I'm highly expressive, do I kind of push myself into being less so? Do I give myself a rubric of when I'm going to talk? And when I feel myself getting more anxious, we all know this, your heart rate increases. You're looking at something, you feel tense about things. Do you just decide for a little while, okay, I know right now, this is not the right time to speak. The other kind of silly trick would be like, never write an angry email, right? If you're going to, then write the email. Do not put people in the address line. Put in your drafts, look at it in the morning. Guarantee you're going to change this, right? Is good decision-making 50-50 emotional and logical? Great question, Jessica. I'm not sure about that. It's a tough one. It's kind of conceptual. I would just offer, I think you need to bring both of those aspects in for people to feel better about the decision, because literally most decisions involve people and I want to bring them along. And so I need to name the feelings and the emotion of it because people are involved. So I would offer that the wise mind brings in both of those. Can you have a high level empathy for others, but not able to express your own emotions and still make high EQ decisions? Absolutely. However, people will not understand your empathy unless you're able to communicate it a little better. And so that's why I brought up this feelings wheel and the 24-hour emotion activity. If I can't name what it is, it makes it a little more challenging and people will question your motives. And as they walk out, what people will say is they'll have to create their own story. They'll have to make something up. As humans, we fill in the blanks constantly. And so we're going to fill in the blanks for you if you're not able to name this. Even if deep down you're like, I really feel. And I know this sounds like a little bit of weird, but at the end here is literally saying exactly what you put in chat helps people understand you. If you literally just said something like I got to tell you, I have a high degree of empathy. I'm not good at expressing my emotions, but I want you to know I care deeply about everybody. I'm just not good at it. People are like, people say then, I know this is going to sound silly. People are like, that's authenticity. Authenticity is not when we quote, show up as we are. Like, authenticity is literally naming it and showing up who you are and how you want to work on something. That's what gets people to run through a brick wall for you. I don't mean it literally. I don't mean in the military sense. I just mean, like, do I want people to give a discretionary amount of effort? Yeah, well, then they need to know that you care about them.
So are you a leader who considers your own thoughts, values, and questions, as well as the perspectives of those around you, to make more inclusive and emotionally intelligent decisions? As Matt outlined in the podcast, the next time you're faced with a decision, reflect on these 4 main areas: emotional data, logical data, values, and perspectives, to guide you to a more sound basis for a decision. If you want to know more about Chapman Co Leadership Institute, go to ccoleadership.com. Don't forget to find us and connect on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter at Barry-Wehmiller, and you'll find more podcasts, articles, and videos at trulyhumanleadership.com. I'm Brent Stewart. Thanks for listening.